Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jody Kielbasa, and I'm the director of the Virginia Film Festival, which is, thank you, which is presented by the University of Virginia and the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. We have a very special guest with us this evening, but first I would like to introduce someone who's become part of the family, and that's Professor Larry Sabato. Every year when the leaves are orange and gold and red, we get together on this stage to talk about politics of some sort or another, and Professor Sabato has been kind to moderate these conversations every time. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now introduce Mr. Oliver Stone. Share with you for a moment a little bit of the background of both of these gentlemen. Dr. Larry Sabato is the director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, which he founded in 1998 to improve civic education and promote citizen participation in politics and government. A Rhodes Scholar, Dr. Sabato has taught more than 15,000 students in his career at Oxford University, Cambridge University, and here at the University of Virginia, where he holds the distinction of University Professor, as well as the Robert Kent Gooch Professorship in Politics. To date, he is the author of 24 books and countless essays on politics, including the well-known Feeding Frenzy, A More Perfect Constitution, The Year of Obama and Pendulum Swing, forthcoming in 2013, the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, which will be his newest book, The Kennedy Half Century, which will focus on the legacies and political impact of the Kennedy assassination on all of the presidential administrations that have followed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Oliver Stone, three-time Academy Award-winning Oliver Stone, has been courting controversy and success in Hollywood for over 30 years. A prolific director, writer, and producer, he's known for his fearless filmmaking approach and his ability to illuminate profound personal struggles. The Bronze Star and Purple Heart recipient for his service in Vietnam, trained an unflinching eye on the stark reality of war in his breakout directorial triumph, Platoon, the first of a Vietnam trilogy, which earned his first Best Oscar in 1986. 3 years later, he captured his second directing statue for Born on the 4th of July, his powerful retelling of a wounded Vietnam vet's rocky return to the home front. He later dramatized the other side of the war through the eyes of an innocent enemy Vietnamese child in Heaven and Earth. Stone has garnered not only awards, but near constant headlines through a colorful career that includes Wall Street, JFK, Doors, Natural Born Killers, Any Given Sunday, World Trade Center, and Wall Street. His next film, Savages, the tale of a pair of marijuana manufacturers who run up against a powerful Mexican cartel, is due out in 2012 with a cast that includes John Travolta, Blake Lively, Salma Hayek, and Benicio del Toro. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present Mr. Oliver Stone and Professor Larry Sabato.
Jody, thank you so much, and congratulations to you on another great year of programming for the Virginia Film Festival, which just keeps better each and every year. I think you'll all agree with that. Give a round of applause, please. We want to bring up the house lights because Oliver Stone and I want to see you. We're totally blinded, and we've got 2 questions for you. So they're going to bring up the house lights for a second. And now we see you, and I hope you're all squinting. Now you know how we feel with the lights. Now, the first question is, by show of hands, how many of you were alive and old enough to remember personally the Kennedy assassination? I see. Okay. Now, how many of you were not? Well, it's about half and half. It's about half and half, which you expect in a university community. Now, how many of you have just seen this marvelous movie for the first time? How many of you have seen it more than once before? That's an awful lot. That's a salute to your filmmaking ability, to say the least. You know, we were talking a little backstage, and you have such a distinguished career. But this movie, and you made so many great ones, but this movie has really reached people and has done so for 20 years. It's a matter, I suppose, of a few key dates in everybody's life. Those who are old enough remember December 7th, 1941. Everybody here, I think, is old enough to remember September 11th, 2001. And most of this audience remembers the third key date that just riveted us. We all can say where we were, what was happening on November 22nd, 1963. And your movie, even though we knew what happened, we thought your movie mesmerized us in so many ways and has caused us to think for 20 years more about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I want to start out by asking you, you were 18, I believe, in November 1963. What are your personal reminiscences of the day of the assassination?
I was, I think, 18.
I think you were 18. But you would know. You would know better than me.
I was 17.
You were 17. I apologize.
I think I had a very normal reaction. I think I was an ordinary American in that way. There was so much. Can you hear me? Yeah, there was so much media, and it was a worldwide shocking event. And I think I was like the people in the movie. You reacted, and it was all believable, and you moved on with your life eventually. So I was at the boarding school, and you know, the usual people running down corridors and things. It shook everybody up. And within 2 years, I was in Vietnam, and back again as a soldier within 4 years. And like Jim Garrison character here, it took many years. In this case, for me, I mean, Jim was alerted to the case, I believe, in the movie. It was 1969. No, not 1968. He comes back into the case. Or 67.
67.
I'm sorry on some of the facts. I haven't seen the movie in a couple of years.
You've seen it since
yeah,
he
I'm a bit rusty on some of the memory on it. But I came into it in Cuba. I was traveling in Havana, and Jim's agent nailed me in a socialist hotel elevator, which takes about 20 minutes to get up to the top floor. He wouldn't stop talking to me about this On the Trail of the Assassins, his second book. And, you got options on, you did a movie about Salvador, you owe the American true. She was a pain in the ass. You know. I said, okay, I'll read your book. And I took the book off to Far East Coast Weekly too. And I started to read it one day in the Philippines, and I'll never forget. It read like a thriller. Jim was its writer, and he wrote a book that you really turned the pages. And it was some hell of a story. So I did undertake it, the idea of thinking, it's got to be a movie, it's got to be dramatic, and it's got to be like a thriller. And why not? He was my, Costa Gavras was one of my heroes. And so I wanted to do, Battle of Algiers, Punta Corvo, Chilo. So I wanted to do something that would be like a ticking clock. But of course, it was a huge story. I didn't know what I was getting into when I read Jim's book.
What else, you read Jim's book, and then what else happened that led to the actual production? It was a long period of time.
At that time, it took about a year to. I bought Jim Morris's book because I liked a lot of the ideas.
Crossfire.
That he was, Crossfire, Jim Morris. He was out of the Galaxy man, I believe.
Yes.
And I bought that book, and I saw the marriage coming together, but then the research got thicker and thicker, and it took almost a year of reading while I was doing other films, too. And I said, I've got to do this. I just got to do it. I believe this story. And the more I found out, of course, the more you believe. I don't think I became partisan. I think that the arguments were solid. I couldn't tell you what happened, as you know from the movie, but what we could do is certainly question the Warren Commission, which was the big monolith that was the black rock that was passed on to us as our history. Yeah? So this is a big thing for me. It turned into a campaign, a war. It was like going to Moscow. Napoleon or something. It was really ended up being like it took me. The movie was released. It shocked me how. You have to realize in 1991 the Kennedy story had died down. It had been years since, and it had been relegated to the margins as a fringe conspiracy theory, despite the work of many private citizens for no money, who just toiled and toiled. They assembled facts like we were talking about Mary Farrell, the researcher who actually read the Warren Commission from beginning to end, which is several thousand pages, and said, this makes very little sense, and here's a logic, and she went through all the metrics, and she started the whole process of keeping files on this thing, because they never really, they release these things, they give it to the reporters a week before, and then they get an Anthony Lewis in the New York Times to vet it, and they put it out on paper, and it's the Bible, but nobody really has time to absorb it. It's like the Supreme Court decision in Bush 4. Nobody read the decision, it was too complicated. They realized after a certain period of time that it was a strange decision, completely out of proportion to what the Supreme Court had done in precedent. So it took a long time for the Warren Commission. Mark Twain was one of the first, as you know, and he was one of them. And several people jumped in from the private field. Myself, I didn't get involved until 1990, 1991. And I was writing the success Point of July and Platoon, so I could do no wrong at that time. I knew that I could get the forces of a significant studio behind this movie, and I did, as a thriller. I said to Warner Brothers, we're going to make a thriller here. But, I also knew that it was not just a pure thriller. Right? This was not the parallax view, because there were going to be long explanations. There was a story of Oswald, there was a story of Dealey Plaza, and there was a story of Mr. Garrison in New Orleans, and the story of X, Fletcher Prouty, in Washington, D.C. 4 stories had to be threaded, and it's a bizarre thriller. I mean, there's nothing quite like it in my mind. It really is a 3-hour movie.
Your critics, and you had a lot of critics for this particular film, we were saying backstage, they took this literally. They took everything in the movie literally. And I think you were trying to pack in a lot of different theories that caused people to think more about the Warren Commission report and its flaws, and it is deeply flawed. You mentioned, by the way, just for the audience, when you go home, Google Mary Farrell Foundation, Farrell Foundation. Mainly, you'll just find documents and information about the assassination, but it's nicely packaged if you want to do further research and look into it. It's well worth doing. But anyway, your critics took so much of this absolutely literally. And you once described this movie as a counter myth, your attempt to create a counter myth to the fictional myth created by the Warren Commission. What did you mean by that?
Well, the Warren Commission is illogical, and we raised more than 100 good questions about it in this movie, which you just saw, maybe more, I think it was 200 really solid contradictions, from the autopsy to the preparation of the things that happened leading up to Dallas, and the post-assassination. And the movie is, of course, is about an assassination. We don't know who the shooter is. It's about the cover-up also, so there's 2 parts to it. It's a huge story, but I view the JFK as the Moby Dick of American stories. It is the great mystery, and that is the white whale. And I saw it right away. I felt there was a commitment. I felt like Ahab going after the white whale. But, I don't know, because I talked to a lot of people. I met probably 50 people who were there that day, and then I talked to maybe another 50 people who really knew a lot about the assassination. So these are people, many of them have passed, but what I was getting was a sense of what Jody Garrison got and Fletcher Prouty got. This was shock and horror at what happened, because it was too fixed. The whole thing was just too many weird things happen, and that's the first, in a court of law, that's the first thing you say. You say, I don't have a case. And Garrison knew that too many weird things that happen, so you got to start somewhere. And that's what we did. We like a mole, like a mountain, you climb the mountain, you lay your pit on it, so you go inch by inch. And so all we could say was, it's a counter myth. We can't prove it. Garrison tried, and of course he took a bath, a big bath. But he got to some very specific incidents in New Orleans, but he only saw a piece of the picture. He unfortunately never met Prouty, but he did meet people like that who did come into his office and tell him strange stories. But Prouty had an overall view of the whole thing from the geopolitical side as a bigger story. And Jim always, and Garrison, to be fair, always said, what is the motive for the crime? You know, why was he killed? Who benefited? Which is a classic thing you ask in any murder. And the media never seemed to deal with that idea of who benefited from this and what was Kennedy really doing. When you go into the underdream of what Kennedy was actually doing, you come up with a much more textured history than we got at that time. For instance, you know, in a broad scope, as we say in the movie, he was really, in 1963, had really moved in another direction to the left. There was a world situation that was evolving quickly, and Khrushchev and him were essentially getting, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, were going much closer together to try to solve this problem of the Cold War. And they were, frankly, the early precursor of Gorbachev and Reagan. And Kennedy was moving on several fronts with Laos, and in Vietnam, and in Cuba for rapprochement for peace. He antagonized the Pentagon, as we know now, in much more depth than we did before. And he himself had forewarned it when he said that, you know, the generals are basically, he was saying several times, the generals are dangerous. There could be a coup d'etat if I have another screw up like the Bay of Kings. But the bigger picture, the motive is the key. And the Lee Harvey Oswald story, as Fletcher always said, was he said that the scenery is for suckers. You know, Oswald is a great character. I love him. I love what Gary Oldman did, but he gives scenery. You get lost in that one, as Norman Mailer did, and I knew Norman pretty well about that. He went there, you know, and you never get out when you go to Oswald. So that kind of a thing, you have to see where the red herrings are in this case. So what was your question?
You're actually answering about Hamilton.
Moby Dick. This is the white whale. It's the white whale, and it's the greatest story, and that's why it's been, you know, yeah, I'd like to make another one somewhere along the way. Come back to it. It's a great book. Great book came out 2 years ago called James Douglas. Is it James Douglas? Yeah, in Virginia, I think. James here in Virginia. He's a layman.
JFK and the Unspeakable.
JFK and the Unspeakable. It puts together the much more information about the assassination, and it was wonderfully written. Some of these books are really hard to read and dry. James Douglas is Kennedy and the Unspeakable. Also, David Talbot, who founded Slate, wrote a wonderful book called The Brothers, which is more about Robert Kennedy, but really gives you a lot of information, a lot of inside information about Jack Kennedy.
Oliver, I was impressed in preparing for this that you went out and personally interviewed dozens and dozens of the direct witnesses and people who had indirect information in Dallas and New Orleans and other people, other places. I wonder if you could tell us who impressed you the most? Who do you still remember today after 21 years?
Wow, so many on that trail. You know. There's a colorful boat of characters. I mean, Garrison was a man of enormous integrity, although he was slandered beyond recognition. Fletcher Prouty was a man of great integrity who resigned his commission in 1964 because he felt something was wrong. All the rest of his life he pursued that mission and he wrote wonderful books about it. The characters in the street go from Perry Russo, and Perry Russo is Perry Russo is a Kevin Bacon character in the movie, but he's a composite of 6 different people that Garrison, most of them were gay, they were all gay, 6 people who had strange information about this character, Clay Shaw, who was known then as Clay Bertrand. But Perry was the most colorful character, and I believe because he was a cab driver, and he was a man who was a fierce right-winger, but he wanted the truth to come out. I want the truth. No, he used to say that. And people like who hated once sleazy guys like Percy Gervais. I don't know, he's gone now. But Carlos Belanger, the crazy Cuban who says, I was not set up, I did this. Now, he doesn't realize that there were other forces pulling his string. And the people in Dallas, Gene Hill, who's gone now. Gene was standing right there with Mary Noonan. I forgot Mary, her friend.
Yes.
They saw it, and they
Facing
saw the head, and that way she ran to the dam. You hear this thing with eyewitnesses. She ran to the knoll, and she's a very innocent woman. And she said obviously there was smoke there, or something was going on. She got arrested, got chased off the knoll, and Arnold with the two boys on the lawn. And the guys who were, the switchman was dead. The switchman, the fellow in the movie with the funny eye. That testimony was in the Warren Commission again, but it's in a certain place like Costner, like Garrison points out. You take this testimony with what the switchman said about the smoke, and you can't put it together the way the commission writes the report. I talked to guys who worked on the bridge, the guys who were right there, the guy that scene where they point, those are real guys, right? There's a guy across the way at the other building. Marion Baker. Who could forget Marion Baker, the chubby kind of cop? And I swear to God, he was a good old boy. I was there in 92nd, whatever it was.
Yeah, inside the school.
I was in there, and there, Oswald would have my coat.
Without
He was
sweating.
barely breathing hard.
He ran down the stairs.
So, 90 seconds, you should see you should do the run up there, and see what it's like. But, I mean, it's David Ferry. A lot of people who knew David Ferry, he had died by then. But David Ferry was a colorful character, well known on the streets. And, this nonsense about, Oswald was there. I met Lewis, what's his name? He's mentioned. He was a guy on the street. He was Oswald's friend. He's a strange friend. Because Oswald is a strange cat, as you can see from the movie, too. Oswald, was working for Bannister in the summer of '63, and there was no one down in the street, and Lewis was, too. And they would pick up a few bucks and go to political rallies, and they'd always be around. They were used. There were guys that Bannister liked to have his guys in the street who would go to these things, and move it around. And they lived hand to foot. They had very little money in those days. Of course, things were a lot cheaper. And this Lewis wrote a little book. Nobody wanted to publish it, but it was such a human story about Lee. He liked Lee, and what a confused individual he was. I believe, for example, Lee did take a shot at Edwin Walker. I have no problem with that. I do.
General Edwin
Because I do
Walker
think
was
that,
a right-wing general.
Yeah, because I think they made a big deal about that. But Oswald was he was perfect. One of those guys that was around the edges of all these political scenes, and they were always used by agencies, intelligence agencies. So Lewis was a pathetic person. And there's a new book, Judith Varney Baker. We're talking about Judith Varney Baker. Nobody will publish it. It was a published book by an underground press. It's her love affair with Lee. It's all the details of New Orleans, 2 years of knowing Lee. And it's accurate because if you're there, you know the laundry, you know the way Lee lived, you know the way he wrote, not that diary, the way he wrote. And I knew Marina, we also got to know Marina very well. She wouldn't talk to us, the neighbor, the one who was really uptight in New England.
Ruth Payne.
Yeah, she wouldn't talk to us. And she's a
Very
character.
awesome.
That one is a real character, because I think she had a lot to do with getting the job there. And the husband, what's his name? The husband worked for, listen, it's in DeMoran Shield. I didn't know him, but I knew some people very well. Very well.
These all made cameos in the film you just saw.